All right. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Richard Sithole. I am an Angular developer at Standard Bank. I am fairly new in the industry, but yeah, I've played around with different tech, and today I'm just here to basically share my story about some of the things that I've discovered along the way. Um, yeah, here's my Twitter handle. If you want to know anything about this presentation afterwards, you can reach out to me. We've got a few slides, so I will go through rather quickly. But yeah, feel free to stop me to ask questions if you have any, or you can save them for afterwards. All right, let's jump right into it. Oh, another thing before we continue is that I noticed that we have a few GDEs here. So if you have any hard questions, please just point it to them. All right. So yeah, GDEs, Google Developer Experts. There's a few around here, so please point those difficult questions to them. Anyway, agenda. So I'm gonna take you through basically this is a very opinionated presentation. In other words, it's a stack which I've chosen, and I've built applications with it. And so I'm gonna take you through quickly through Angular for those of you that have not used it before. And then we'll talk a little bit about Firebase and what it entails and all its features. After that, I will introduce you to a wrapper, which is it's called AngularFire 2. We'll talk a little bit about offline first strategies using the service worker. And then after that, we will build a Hacker News PWA. So there's a demo coming up. After that, we'll basically just benchmark that PWA to see how it stacks up in terms of performance. And then we'll use Lighthouse and other tools to optimize and see how we can improve the performance. Yeah, we'll test the stack, which is pretty much what I've just mentioned now, and then we'll share some learnings and findings, and I'll also show you some resources where you can learn more about this technology stack. All right, so moving right into it, the stack. JavaScript frameworks. There's quite a few of these. And sometimes it feels like there's a new one coming out every second week. Actually, there's one that comes out quite frequently. But I think it's arguably, you can say these three are pretty popular. I got this screenshot from the other day from John Papa. He did a little, so I was looking for what do you call it? A word cloud for the different JavaScript frameworks. I couldn't find one, and then I happened to come across this, and I asked John Papa if I can use it, and this was his response. He says, of course, but keep in mind that polls are not perfect. This captures people on Twitter who follow me, who happen to see it, and who want to reply, which I think was pretty fair. So I thought I'll put in that disclaimer. But I think if you look at other comparison or polls, React is pretty much in front, but this is not a popularity contest. It's about using a framework that is fit for purpose, and clearly you can see which one I went for. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight, Angular. So you might be asking yourself, why Angular? For those that have not used Angular before, Angular is, for me personally, I actually started with Vue. I did a few for a short while, but then because of work, I had to move on to Angular, which I love to bits at the moment. I'm still learning it, so correct me if I, misspell or missay something. But basically, under the hood, this is basically the basic components of an Angular. The most basic one is an Angular module or ng module. It comprises of a template and a component, which gives you your Angular view. We use event bindings to take input from the user, and we process it through in the component, and then we return application data via property bindings. Directives and bindings, you basically it's some logic, some business logic that modifies your template before you render it to your user. It has this very cool piece of technology called dependency injection that allows you to use shareable services which you can import into your component It helps keep your component nice and dry, and you can reuse them. So the idea is basically just, if you have a specific feature, maybe user login, you want to keep that as a single module. There's benefits for that, which I will delve into in the next couple of slides. But yeah, basically that is Angular under the hood. The most benefits that people are aware is exactly what it says there. You're able to use your Angular skills to basically build for not only mobile, not only web, but mobile and native desktop as well. It is possible. Things like Ionic, they heavily use this under the hood. Angular by design is built for speed and performance. If you add things like web workers and service workers and server-side rendering, you just basically you can make your applications pretty fast. Other benefits or other reasons why people love Angular is because of its incredible tooling and its community behind it. I mean, we've got the Angular CLI. I think it's one of the most beautiful piece of software. With the latest release of Angular 6, we've added extra features like schematics and elements and all this kind of stuff, which I'll delve into in later slides. And it's loved by millions. Myself and some of the web developers here, I hope you have tried it. If you haven't tried it, please dive in and have a look at it. Angular.io is the website you want to go to get started. So the next piece of technology that I'm going to talk about is Firebase. How many of you have used Firebase before? Okay, quite a few. Cool. Have you used all the features that are there at the moment? Not? Okay, so right, absolutely. So that's, yeah, I've gone through that route. So I've tried to use all of the features that are available for the web. But it's basically, if you don't know what Firebase is, you can think of it as a backend as a service. So if you do not want to tinker with provisioning servers and infrastructure and managing all of that, people who've worked in big organizations where you're serving millions of customers, you will know that as your application grows or as your user base grows, so does your infrastructure. But Firebase allows you, well, it basically abstracts that layer for you because it's a backend as a service. So you're able to build applications fast without managing infrastructure. It is backed by Google. Yeah, and I think the one cool thing with Firebase is the fact that most of the features, they work nicely together, as you'll see now. The first one that I'll quickly touch on is authentication. Authentication is basically just managing your user authentication. The cool thing with this, I think, it's the fact that you can use multiple providers, whether it be Google, Twitter. I'm not sure if Facebook is there. Yes. As well, if say you also want to use passwordless, so you don't want your users to create a password, you can use that as well, or you can go old school and use it, your email and password. The next feature is the Firestore, Cloud Firestore. This is the actual database that you interact with. The nice thing with the database is that it's a NoSQL database. It's based on the concept of collections. Collections, you can think of it as a JSON object. Within collections, you have the actual documents. Documents is where you would store your ID, your user ID, email address, and all other properties that you want to store for the user. And then cloud storage. So if you want, say you have an application that you offer file uploads, you can use cloud storage to store those images. Couple that with cloud functions, which is one of my favorite features, is that cloud functions is basically, you can think of it as like web hooks. So you imagine a scenario where you offer clients, or it's an image sharing service or application. Typically, users will upload anything that they can. As long as there's a CN upload, they can put in anything in there. So with cloud functions, you're able to basically detect what they're uploading, the size and file format, and you can do some sort of transformations before you store it up into your storage. And you can also create records in your Firestore database. Once you're done building your application and you want to host it, you can do so. Firebase offers a hosting service, which is very, very generous tier. The very cool thing is with this is that they've got CDN distributed globally. So as soon as you upload your application, it basically gets distributed across the globe through the CDN network. And that means for your users that regardless whether you're here or you're in Dallas or in China, you can just pretty much have a low latency access to the application and your assets, which is a very cool thing. MLKit, I heard through the Snowvine that someone is going to do a talk on that. We don't have it in web as yet. Correct me if I'm right. Yeah, but I think it might be in the pipeline, I hope. Yeah, we'll see. The future is bright for Firebase. All right, now, just give me a sec. Who of you have heard of AngularFire or have used AngularFire before in your application? Okay, I see 1, 2 hands. AngularFire is AngularFire 2, because we're on, that's the latest one, is basically, it's a marriage between Angular and Firebase. It's an Angular wrapper for Firebase. So all those features that I've just spoken about just now, your authentication, your database, storage, and all that stuff, they're all available. But because we are Angular developers, we like to do things the Angular way. So we built a wrapper for it. The cool thing with this library is the fact that it is an official library. It is developed by the guys. I think David East is one of them, and the Angular core team, and many other guys from Google as well use it. The one thing that I will show later on, what I like about this wrapper is the persistence. So you just call in one method and allows your application to basically persist your data. So imagine you're busy capturing a form, and all of a sudden Eskom decides to cut electricity, and you don't have internet connection. All of a sudden, it will persist your application. Once the connection comes back, you'll be able to access the locally cached data from your Firestore database. And once the internet connection comes back on, then you'll be able to continue where you left off, which is a very good, cool feature. It's pretty popular. This was taken about a week ago, I think. It's just over 17,000 downloads a week. It's currently at RC release candidate 11, but they move pretty fast. So by the time you go and check it out, it might be on 12. There have been some breaking changes in the past. I learned the hard way, but yeah, it's something that you need to keep in mind. But it's got a very good support and community behind it. How am I doing on time? Still okay? All right. How would you get it in your project? You do it like that. The nice thing about it is that you only import the stuff that you need. So if your application only uses the database module, you only need to install AngularFire store module. If it's authentication or storage, you just import the stuff that you want to use. And to initiate it, down there at the bottom, this is where you obviously enter all your secrets and whatnot. The nice thing also is the fact that you do not have to, so typically it would be on your main module. With Angular, you have at least one root module and one root component. But with, depending on the structure of your application, you just need to import this where you're using it, in the module that you want to use it, for benefits that we'll discuss shortly. How do you use it? Using it is pretty straightforward. If you've worked with TypeScript before, this is what it looks like. Angular, by the way, is also written in TypeScript, which gives you strongly typed powers to make sure your applications or your code is resilient. So to get started with Angular Firestore, you would, because it's RxJS based, so you will have to have RxJS. You'll need Angular Firestore. You just import it like that, and through dependency injection, you pull it in through your constructor. And this is what I was referring to earlier on, collection. So this will be your high-level JSON object in your database, and the name of the collection is items. And it's got this very nice methods that you can call. Value changes will basically return you an observable array. Um, if you want, I think there's another one called snapshot change. I'm not 100% sure what it's called, but it will return that observable array with metadata as well. So if you have IDs stored and those kind of things, you will be able to pull them through as well. And to display it in your template, you just call it an ng4. You iterate through your observable, but because it's an observable, you need to use the ASIC pipe to unwrap that observable. And through interpolation, you'll be able to extract all the data that you need through there. So it's pretty straightforward. It's everyday code that we write if you use Angular on a daily basis. I should not assume that. A lot of mobile developers are looking at me like, no, we don't do that. All right. Moving along. Oh, so yeah, the time has come for, I think everyone is looking forward to this, but not quite yet. If you're still wide awake by now, and if you remember what I mentioned at the beginning or in the agenda, is that this talk is not about Angular, and it's not about Firebase, it's not about PWAs, it's about everything. It's about using all these technologies together to get the most out of them. So I'll just quickly take you through the service worker. Specifically, we'll focus specifically on the Angular service worker. In its simplest form, a service worker is simply a JavaScript file. It's a JS file where you define how your application requests how it requests network requests. So it basically intercepts network requests and it stores the response into your cache API. That's its simplest definition. And you might be wondering why you want to do that. I think it's for obvious reasons, because cache is obviously on your browser itself. So I'm talking about the browser cache. So the idea behind service workers is that you want to show something on the screen as quickly as possible. So first time around, when you make a network call, the service worker will jump in and say, okay, let me have a look. You want to make a call to this API, and it will cache the response and put it into the cache API on the browser itself. So next time when you request the same API or the same address, it will basically look into the cache, or if it doesn't find the information that it's looking for, or the cache is expired, then it will make a network call. The cool thing with the Angular service worker specifically is that you can define how all these things work. But first, before we get to that, this is something that tricked me over when I started looking into service workers. It looks very simple. It is a simple diagram, I think. So basically, this is what happens when your application loads. The service worker gets registered, it gets installed, and it gets activated, and it starts doing its magic. But it's very important I think for me, I did this mainly for me actually, because I think it's very important that you understand how the life cycle works, because it's very easy to get tripped over. You'll be expecting a certain behavior, and meanwhile this thing is bringing back something completely different. So depending on how you configure it and so forth, it helps to basically understand how the life cycle works. Browser support. Who can tell me what's wrong with that picture? Well, except for that lonely outlier over there, I think everyone is in agreement that this is a cool idea, right? So yeah, I think you guys can go ahead and use this stuff because it is supported across board. I mean, look at even Samsung Internet. They're right, they're right up there as well. They've been supporting it since 4, which is pretty cool. So yeah, guys, please go ahead and start tinkering with this sort of stuff. Now, because we are Angular developers, I'm looking at you, Rebecca. We will talk about service workers in the context of Angular. So if you look at these steps, there's a six-part, it's about 6 steps. Most of these steps you would have to do it by hand not so long ago, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, I am not mistaken because I had to do some of this stuff by hand. But with the latest Angular 6, we have added a new it's called schematics. Basically, this at Angular/PWA, So you just throw in there, you just go ng add Angular PWA, and it basically goes ahead and does all this stuff. It configures the stuff for you. I think the one key thing that maybe is worth mentioning in the steps is the manifest JSON file. As you will see shortly, so basically the manifest JSON file, it basically that's where you define how your app, your PWA, how you want your PWA to look like once it's downloaded. Or I'm not sure if you've come across a PWA as yet. You should have, because most of the South African websites, they basically turning their applications to PWAs. But basically, so you'll notice on the address bar there, you might have like a same color theme with the rest of the application. So you define those kind of things in that manifest JSON file. Another very important file that the Angular PWA schematic does for you is create this ng-sw config JSON file. This is, if you remember what I've mentioned earlier on, what I said earlier on was that you can basically tell the service worker how to deal with network requests, when to look into the cache first, or whether to look into the cache first, or if it should go to the network first. You define all those kind of things, all those things in the ng-sw config JSON file. And once you've done, you just basically build the project. Make sure you build it with --prod. That allows you, well, it builds the project in ahead of time compilation. Basically just tree shakes all the unnecessary polyfills and all the other stuff that is not necessary for the app to run. Makes it very lean, and then you just run the project. Yeah, so now let's look at what is being cached. Are you guys still with me? Are you still following me? Have I lost you completely? Please do raise a hand if I'm moving too fast, or if you've lost me completely. This is what is being cached. So there's two groups. So this is obviously how Angular have decided or have defined how to cache your assets. There's two groups. The first one is called asset groups. Asset groups, basically, it's where you tell your service worker what to cache first. So your app skeleton. So if you guys are not 100% sure, a web application usually comprises of an index HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files. So what we're saying here, especially on the install mode, we're saying that as soon as the application loads, go ahead and cache all these files. So your HTML, the index HTML, anything that ends with bundle.css and bundle.js and chunk.js. We have another one here called assets. This one's install mode is lazy. What that means is that you do not immediately start caching the stuff. Wait until the user navigates. So as soon as the user navigates to a certain URL, certain path, then it will cache those assets. The other group is called data groups. In data groups, we have two types. The first one is called freshness, or it uses strategy called freshness. In simplest terms, it just means network first. So go into the network first, and so in this specific example, when you hit that URL, go to the network. Don't look into the cache first. And yeah, you can also specify through the cache config the max age and the timeout. So after 10 seconds, if this thing doesn't return anything, it'll look into the cache. The other option is performance. This is for all the remaining routes of your application, however many you want. This one will look into the cache first. So it'll say cache. If the max age has expired, then it will go out to the network and fetch those assets. All right, moving along. If you've done everything correctly, then you will, you'll look at when you look at your dev tools, you look at something like this. As you can see here, we are in offline mode. So prior to this, you would have to have gone to the app first, because obviously it has to cache from somewhere else. So you first have to visit the app. It will cache that using that asset group strategy. It will cache all the basic files, and when you refresh, then it will serve it from the service worker. So this is how you know that your application is being served from the service worker. So what you're looking at now is a good thing. You want to to see this when you've turned your application to a PWA. All right. Okay. So I've covered that. So yes, show the thing. Here's the demo. Do you guys want to take out your phones and go to that URL? I'm sorry, I should have tiny URLs. Didn't have time.
Can I ask, is it
Mm.
possible to migrate current Firebase and AngularFire?
Yes, you can use them side by side. You don't have to have one or the other. They can work in tandem. Is everyone there? Okay, awesome. So that is a PWA. If you are lucky or if you have a smartphone, um, using a browser which is up to date, you might get a little banner that asks you if you want to add to your home screen. Have you guys seen that? Okay, you can go ahead and add it if you want. It's not a must, but if you want to see how these features all come together, yeah, that's one of the benefits of going the PWA route. Yes, Josh, you good? Okay, cool. Yeah, that is a PWA. So, and if you're accessing that URL through a browser, through a desktop, and you run it through Lighthouse. Lighthouse, let me just quickly speak about Lighthouse. Is basically it's one of the tools that you can use to assess a website or web application's performance. With that specific one, as you can see there, that's the same URL that you guys went to now. It was done a couple of days ago, so it's all green. So you want to be hitting, you want to have greens here. So the most important ones, obviously, here is performance and progressive app. You don't have to check for this other stuff, but it's good to know that you're all, you're all in the green. Um, yeah, I think the key matrix for me for this screen is, well, I think not just for me, but like for most applications, is time to interactive. What that means is that, how long does it take for your application to get to a state where it's responsive to user input. So you want to have that definitely in the green. In fact, if it's over 10 seconds, right now it's 4.6 seconds. If it's over 10, then it'll start affecting your progressive web app matrix. So this will probably go down to around 70 or something like that. And then at the bottom here, you see this is a film strip. It shows you, the timeline shows you how quick your application loaded. First meaningful. So another very cool thing about Matrix, performance Matrix specifically, things like Netflix TV UI. So they have specific metrics that they've decided to focus on and optimize. For them is TTI, as it's also known. They also look at, if I'm not mistaken, is that estimated input latency or input responsiveness. So it's how long it takes when a user taps on something, how quickly does the application respond. For them, that is very important. And then also the CPU usage. So those are the three ones that they track. So for every application will obviously be different depending on what you're optimizing for, what the app does, and what your user base look like. But it's always good to have greens all around. I just like looking at the greens. All right. So if you're not getting those greens, guys, this is some of the ideas that you can follow to basically get to the greens. The first one is called the purple pattern. Um, I really enjoyed your talk, Mr. Geyser. Yeah, he talked a little bit about the pebble pattern, but it's pretty cool. So the idea is, I think it's always been there, but I think it was coined the first time at Google I/O 2016 by the Polymer team. The idea is basically, and you'll see how this all comes together. You push critical resources first, so your app shell, the asset groups. You render initial routes with a very lean app module. So in the Angular context, is that on your core module, you don't want to have as many depend or imports in there. You want to have, you want to keep it as lean as possible. You pre-cache the remaining routes with the service worker, and then you lazy load the routes with ng modules. So this goes back to that idea of making sure that you keep all the features together and modularize your application. That helps you to basically apply lazy loading and those kind of stuff. This is just basically a diagram that shows you how your application loads. You first get the index HTML. Well, you guys saw the splash screen, right? There was a splash screen, then that's contained within the index HTML file. Your app module gets loaded, and then obviously other stuff happens, but eventually you get to fully interactive, which is, in my opinion, that you want to get there as quickly as possible. All right. Now, you may be wondering, where do I start? I've got an existing application, but how do I know how it's performing? You can do a bundle analysis. You install Webpack Bundle Analyzer through npm. You add that to your JSON package JSON file, and then you run the analyzer. This will basically scan through your node modules. It will scan through all your files, your application, and it will give you a breakdown of the size of your application. So you will get something that looks like this. This is for that Hacker News PWA. As you can see here, Angular is the biggest, taking the biggest space, closely followed by Firebase, and you've got all these other files as well. And there's your source file there. So clearly, I mean, just by looking at this, you can say, okay, so maybe I should be thinking about lazy loading Firebase or modularizing that part so that I don't have to load it immediately when the app launches. So that's something that I would do. I would make sure that that is a separate module. And by doing so, you would basically cut your bundle size in half or roundabout. This is another tool. This is a very, very cool tool. I actually got to play a little bit more with it today, and I discovered new features as we're going along and got so excited. But basically, so this basically, Anna, you put in a URL. You can specify the sort of connection. So think about your user base. Let's say you're a big company and you've got users all over the world. And let's say business is starting to become sluggish in a certain geography, and you want to find out how it's obviously an online shop or online application, and you want to find out how are people experiencing your application within that geography. So you can specify basically the type of network connections that are typical within that area. Once you've done that, once you've run that, and I'm just going to show you one example, there's many things that you can do with it. You'll get something like this, which is called a waterfall view. Basically shows you how your application loads. So once it's connected, it first loads your HTML. You see it's pretty quick. So because I've inlined everything, the CSS, HTML, you can see that you get first paint very quickly, just under half a second. So that's your HTML loaded, and then it does your parsing, compiling, and rendering your JavaScript. That is actually the biggest chunk of work with browsers. JavaScript is, if you can optimize that part, if there's any part that you can optimize, it should be that part through things like lazy loading and all the other things that we've discussed before. But you can see here our application gets fully interactive, run about there. Yeah. So this is one of the tools that you can use. There's many others. There's also websitegrader.com. It gives you similar matrix, but it goes into detail in terms of, what's the reasoning behind the certain matrix. If you're old school, you can still use your dev tools. Yeah, so this one is very similar. The cool thing with that first one that I showed you, this one, is that you can actually simulate what DevTool does under the hood. Most of it actually is encapsulated in there. But yeah, you can also do it that way. I think where you want to focus in is just obviously looking at how your application gets loaded, and then you'll be able to, well, you'll identify where the browser is taking long, or the application is taking long to getting loaded, and you can optimize for those things. This is one talk that I really enjoyed. It's by a guy called Maxim Salnikov. He's an Angular GDE. Yeah, so he basically goes into detail. All the stuff that I've covered, or the slides that I've covered so far, he delves a little bit deeper into those. So I would strongly suggest that you check out this presentation. Very cool. So what have we learned? No, I'm asking you the question. What have you learned? Nothing? All right. What I've learned is that, so to get started, I think, you want to, let's say you've got a big application or you've got an existing application, you don't know where to start. I would say, look at this quadrant, look at where there's low effort, and where you get the most value, high impact. So go for the low hanging fruit, by using the things that we've discussed, following the purple pattern, modularizing your application, lazy loading, those kind of funky stuff. You will yield more value by doing so. Angular, maybe I should also add that Angular does have a style guide, basically best practices of how you structure your Angular applications. Yeah, I would strongly recommend that you follow that as well. By default, you will basically build very optimum applications. What's coming next? Mike, what's coming next? I mean, Angular 6 was released recently, and with it came pretty cool stuff like schematics. You've already seen it, how we do the PWA stuff. Elements is also another cool feature that you can use today. Going to the future, I don't know, I haven't been following very closely lately, but I think they will optimize all the tools, all the new cool shiny stuff that we have now. I think they'll continue optimizing them and making them better and introducing new stuff as we go along. So I would say, go angular.io for Angular stuff, Firebase website for all the cool stuff coming out from Firebase. As a side note as well, today, what was it, yesterday? David East tweeted, he said, he says if you're using Firebase, I've got this new thing. It's a secret thing, but if you want to know what it is, DM me. So so I cannot freaking wait. I did DM him this morning, but I'm still waiting to see what the hell it is. But I'm pretty excited. I'm sure it's gonna be fun. I think at this moment I should want to take a moment to say thanks to people that have helped me along this journey. Jeff is a very, very cool guy. He's got a on AngularFire.com. He has tons of tutorials, of learning material. Yeah, he's simply the best. He's very good at what he does. Maxim's helped me with some PWA stuff, questions, and John Papa. I like listening to him and his Adventures of Angular podcast. Um, yeah, and also my teammates at Standard Bank. We are the wealth team, the web team. And Free Code Camp. Free Code Camp is a non-profit organization. If you're new into programming, or if you want to, or you just started and you want to, hang out with people in a similar boat, I actually try and organize once a month a meetup. We meet at Rosebank, just basically just networking. But if you go to freecodecamp.org, you can basically get started in this journey. There was a gentleman that mentioned earlier on that is not from the it's not in the web space. That's how I got started, self-taught. But I really enjoy what I'm doing now. And yeah, and obviously you guys, GDG Johannesburg, thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate that. Yeah, and I've got some resources for you. So if you look at that app that you downloaded, right at the bottom, there's source code that will take you to GitHub, my GitHub account. If you want to optimize and you want to help me out with something, just send me a pull request. I'll be happy to manage it. Yeah, and with that, I'd like to say thank you very much, and I cannot wait to see what you build next. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
Any questions?
Good one.
Yep.
If I'm using a service worker and I want to fetch data in my backend through an API, a JSON API, would I have to change my HTTP code?
Can you just repeat the question?
So let's say I'm fetching data from the backend.
Yeah.
I'm using the HTTP service in Angular.
Yeah, yeah.
Do I have to change any of that code?
No, okay. So the service worker, with the Angular service worker, you don't. I should have shown. I don't have that slide, but anyway, when you look at the service worker file that Angular generates for you, it's about. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's about 2,000 lines of code. You don't have to touch that. If you wanna get to the nitty-gritties of it, if you wanna add some of your own stuff, what is it called? Workbox. Workbox. There's other similar tools, but you can go that way. It is possible to use more than one. Jeff, the guy that I showed earlier on, he's got a video on that. But yeah, I think Workbox, if you want to just really get into the nitty-gritties of it, you can go that route. Yeah.
I wanted to know with the service workers, is there a way of kind of showing the cache and updating the view when the server responds? So if you've got a big data query, a very slow query,
Yeah.
if you can show a cached result but update it when you get
Yes,
the
yes. So you saw that life cycle, right? I only showed the main components, but there's sort of like interim steps that happen in between, and you are able to intercept those. And yeah, you just add listeners basically, and then you can respond depending on the state of the service worker or the network request. Any other questions? Yeah.
On that note,
Mm.
on both questions, Node, does this work with Node.js primarily?
What is this?
Angular Firebase service. On server-side scripting, is it primarily with
Oh yes, yes.
Node.js?
If I'm not mistaken, right? So I think it works on Node.
It's got libraries for a whole bunch of things.
So there's an SDK, the Firebase SDK. You can just download it, and then you can interact with the Firebase. That I know with Cloud Functions, they use Node.js.
Okay, because the second question,
Mm.
if you had to get a response on how far, if you're uploading a file,
Mm.
it's 100 megabytes,
Yeah.
you would add your event listeners on your Node server, and then it will, I know Redis, there's a Redis proxy
Mm.
parallel solution to this, and that will basically send a message to your front end, and that will, on your service worker, if you have it configured, will put up like a alert or pop-up to say percentage.
So in that case, are you specifically interested on the upload status? How far you are with the upload? Is that what you're asking?
Configuration of the service worker notifications, based on the second question of how do you check your cache?
Okay.
To see with the response of what you've done in the background.
Yeah.
So it's basically configured on the server, and event triggers that are there will start pushing through to the front end.
Okay.
Based on the scenario using Redis and Node.js.
Okay. Okay. Very cool.
In its current phase,
Mm.
because I'm used to working on production environments, would you recommend this in a development environment or a production environment? Is this something you can scale at a production level environment for a client, or is it still relatively unstable?
Are you talking about this Angular service worker?
AngularFire. Is it something that you can
Oh,
use in a
yes.
production
No,
environment?
no, definitely.
Production?
Absolutely. We at the bank we use some features. Correct me if I'm wrong, PJ. Oh wait, Eddie, you left it by the time. He ran away when they introduced Firebase. I don't know why. Yes, you can use it in production. I've used, so everything that I've shown you now. I know I've showed you a sort of like a toy app, but this is still under production. I've built something for a non-profit organization. It uses all the features for Angular. It uses AngularFire too, with all the features. Okay, we don't have internet connection, but yeah. Anyway, but it is ready for product. You can use it today.
Yeah, because my only concern is I also work with major banks. If something's not production ready, then, or can't move in a production environment, then it's not generally considered safe to be actually working on.
Well, if it's good for Google, I think it's pretty safe. I think maybe another thing that I didn't mention was the fact that with Angular specifically, they, most of the apps within Google, they build using Angular. So before they release a new feature, they'll have to make sure that they don't break any of those apps. So, with that rigorous testing, I think, it's pretty safe for us to use as well.
Just don't use beta versions. Cool.
All right.
Well, thanks, Richard.
Cool stuff.
One little tip from us.
Thank you so much.